Hello, and welcome to Unsheathed with your hosts, Kyle Gold and Cam Hirosaki. We hope that you enjoy the program. Please stick around afterwards. There'll be cake and blowjobs.
Hi, welcome to Unsheathed 36. We have returned in one piece from WonderCon and are back in our discreet mountain bunker location. I'm slightly congested Kyle Gold.
That wasn't even fluster-worthy. I was just trying to think of something clever and I failed again. I'm Cam Hirosaki, and I have tea instead of alcohol. Maybe that's my problem.
I think that could be. It's not as lubricating.
I wouldn't say... Oh, it's got honey in it, so it's slippery and sticky.
Honey's not slippery, honey.
You did not just call me honey. Ooh, girl.
I have tea also, which is good, but I also have my Coke Zero. Because, you know, nothing makes you healthier than Coke Zero.
It was originally conceived of as a health tonic. Well, Coca-Cola was.
Not Coke Zero, Coca-Cola. Yeah, but also originally had cocaine in it, so...
Well, hell, what's not going to make you feel better if cocaine doesn't do the trick, right?
That's true. It'll make you keep buying it, at least. So, we had a fun time at WonderCon. We really enjoyed the hanging out there with all the incredible non-furry people. And thanks once again to Jaded Fox, who gratefully supplied most of the questions for the podcast, because a lot of people we asked to talk kind of ran away.
Yeah, actually, I was pleased upon listening to the final cut of that episode that we lost most of our failed attempts to get questions from people who ran away when we stuck a microphone in their face.
Yeah, Kit did a good job. K-Tech did a good job putting that together, so thanks also to him, as always.
It's like, hi, random people. Do you want to talk to a gay, furry adult writing podcast?
We didn't even say that. We just said, hey, would you like to ask us a question about writing? And they were like, yeah. It wasn't like we asked them to, service us or something. Anyway, Otter's all kind of flustered and distracted now, which was not my intention.
It's got the 10-yard stare of...
By the time... Yeah, now he's imagining a story at a convention where there's kind of like a booth and people lining up, and anyway. Which gets to an email we got that we're not going to read today, but... that was a teaser for y'all. So there's some major awards are still open for voting. You should vote for your favorite furry story, novel, movie, comic book, published illustration, anthology of 10 erotic short stories based on the 10 Commandments, novel about a football player and his gay activist boyfriend. Just as an example. It's www.ursamajораwards.org.
.org, yes.
And I think there's a link on the front page so you can go vote. That's open till April 18th, which I believe is this coming Sunday. So
yeah, by the time this episode drops, you can probably count on one paw how many days you have left to vote. So
if you have one of regular paws and not one of those like Disney cartoon paws with 3 fingers.
I don't want that few fingers. I like having my digits.
I know you do. So, yeah, be sure and go vote on those, because, all joking aside, if you do vote for us, that's great. We really, really appreciate it. But it's really just more important for you to go out and vote for the stuff that you like, because it really means a lot to the artists, and that's how we writers get recognition in the furry fandom, because we can't sit in the dealer's room and sell sketches for $50 a pop.
Yeah, true. And there's still no podcast category.
No, but there might be next year. We're getting a lot of podcasts in the recommended list, and I keep telling people, write in and tell them you want a podcast category. They move slow, but they do move eventually.
I mean, I think that the furry podcasting market is certainly, wide enough to warrant one.
Oh yeah, there's like a dozen of furry podcasts out there. There was also, just real quick, there was also kind of an interesting thread on FA in the past couple weeks talking about the future of furry writing and how it could possibly be broken out into the mainstream. And, there was a lot of interest and back and forth on it. My opinion in general is the example that I kind of see furry fiction following most closely is cyberpunk, which in the mid-'80s had a big flowering kind of...
Yeah.
As opposed to our fiction, which has deflowering. But cyberpunk had like Neuromancer, which won a Hugo and Nebula Award.
Yeah.
And then cyberpunk became very hip for like 5-10 years. And a lot of people got stories published. They were cyberpunk anthologies. There were cyberpunk novels. Then eventually the Matrix Reloaded was made and the whole genre died.
Yep. It was, the Matrix was sort of like the Showgirls to Elizabeth Berkley's career. What, I just wrecked my analogy, but you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. But honestly, the interesting thing about cyberpunk is it's still around and people are still kind of aware of it, but it's not a big movement so much anymore.
Because it feels so dated.
Yeah.
Because, like, real-world technology has so far eclipsed what a lot of the, tropes were supposed to embody.
Well, you still can't, like, jack into the neural net into your skull, but...
No, but people are pretty much connected to, internet sensations, like, almost 24 hours a day. People have it on their phone now, and,
That's true. I do know people who can't seem to function without a phone in their paws. But I think... So I think the way that things will go, and I did say that I posted this on the forum, is I think it's just going to be one furry novel that's well written enough that it captures the attention of the mainstream, and, probably most of my work is not going to qualify for that because... Hell, apparently we can't even get a gay romantic comedy released over here.
I was just going to say.
Much less a gay, furry romantica novel. For those of you who don't know, there's a comedy called I Love You, Philip Morris, which stars Jim Carrey and Ewan McGregor, in which we'd never heard of until our good friend Foosball pointed out that it had been released in the UK, like, in March. And they still haven't really found an American distributor for it.
And that's a shame.
Yeah.
Because they're both marketable people. They're both good actors. I mean...
Well, and that was kind of the question posed in the article is, it's not like this is a couple of unknowns doing a gay romantic comedy. This is Jim Carrey. This is Ewan McGregor. I mean, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ace Ventura.
Oh, my God. Oh, you just ruined the movie and haven't even seen it.
I mean, who wouldn't want to see that?
Now I'm just imagining, like, Ewan McGregor doing his, like, deadpan Alec Guinness impression, but, like, saying, like, dirty gay sex dialogue.
And, of course, as soon as I mentioned Ace Ventura, everybody thought about Jim Carrey talking out of his butt, so...
Oh, my brain just melted.
And with that. But anyway, yeah, I think... The one thing that I am kind of optimistic about is that there's a lot more activity in the furry writing scene than there was even 5 years ago when actually it's about 6 years ago that I started writing novels. And there's a lot more activity, there's a lot more interest, as evidenced by the fact that we have people listening to this podcast, which I mean, listening to us just blabber on for half hour, 45 minutes is pretty cool.
Yeah, one of the points I saw raised in that same thread was people were trying to split hairs between, well, are you talking about the future of furry writing or the future of furry publishing? And then by extension, is this a thing about marketing and trying to, expand, the sort of reader base? And honestly, I don't think that furry fiction is something that by itself is going to just sort of discover this reader base. And I don't think it's a bad thing that it's like that. I mean, I think that as it is, the people who want to read this sort of stuff are starting to read it.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's get our readership up in the furry fandom first, and then we can worry about the mainstream.
I mean, like our biggest problem was that we couldn't get furries to read furry writing. Like, let's focus on that before we try to get regular people to.
And that's happening a lot more now too, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing, kind of, I think where my name came up a few times is there's sort of a general sensation of, well, of course, all the sex writing is popular, but we need to get people to read, real good writing. And I think, the people kind of seem to indicate that, or they seem to believe that was a problem with the fandom. And as I pointed out in a private letter, that's a problem with humanity.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason that, Danielle Steele has outsold, I don't know, pick an author you love, Ted Chiang, who's a brilliant science fiction writer who's released 2 anthologies, or an anthology and a novel. And there's a reason that, trashy romances are on the bestseller list all the time. There's a reason that, I'm a fan of the young adult paranormal stuff, Cassie Clare and all that, but a lot of the books are not all that deep, and they're not all that interesting, and they're basically sort of like Titanic with vampires.
Yeah, look at Twilight.
Exactly. The reason the Twilight books are bestsellers, and I haven't read them, so again, I don't want to comment on them, but, I think there's kind of this illusion that if we can only get out in the mainstream there, they would appreciate good writing. And, the colleges of this country and all over the world are thick with graduate students in creative writing who believe that if they can only get people to appreciate good writing, they'll be rich and famous. And,
everyone wants to write the next Ulysses.
But, that's
a whole different problem, actually.
So, I don't know. And of course, I'm, speaking from kind of a biased position because I write stuff that is popular. So,
well, I mean, again, if you want to talk about, if you make something sexual, people are immediately just going to go for that. I will direct you once again to Showgirls with Elizabeth Berkley.
Yeah. I would not have thought when we started doing this podcast that before we got through 50 episodes, we would do a podcast where we had 2 references to Showgirls. So, well done.
I think that's the most anyone's mentioned Showgirls.
I've so far managed to avoid watching it myself, but yeah, I'm very fortunate, and I certainly did not start out to write things that were popular, and I think, people who were not around on the scene 5-6 years ago, I've mentioned this a few times, but, when we published Vol, Sofa Wolf was taking a chance on me. There was not a market for gay adult novels at that point. So, I just kind of try to improve my writing as much as I can. Shadow of the Father has very little sex in it. Not the next novel that's going to be released, but the next one I plan to write has very little in it, may actually have no sex in it.
Yeah. Waterways didn't have a whole lot either.
So it seems like it's just about every other book.
You go through phases like the tides.
Yeah. Bridges has a lot of sex in it, though.
High tide, low tide.
But anyway, so I think it's really interesting. I'm delighted to be a part of it. I'm real excited to see where it's going. And, we're still going to be here talking about our furry writing and blowjobs as long as people will listen to us. So,
and speaking of adult furry fiction and novel markets and whatnot, I am sort of technically writing a novel now. At least according to some arbitrary definitions.
Congratulations.
And I hesitate to speak of a market for it because I honestly don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I don't have any plans, so don't bombard me with that. All I'll say is that step number 1 is for me to finish writing it. And
that is a good step number 1.
Yeah, I'm guessing I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through like draft 1.5. It originally just started as a 15K short story, and that was my first draft. And the kind folks who looked it over were like, "Yeah, no, you need to flesh this out." And so I'm doing that.
You're doing some real interesting stuff with it too.
I'm trying to. It's certainly it's making me think in ways that are atypical for me, and I think that the people who read it would. I bet if I published it under a different name and somebody picked it up and read it, they wouldn't necessarily guess that I wrote it.
There's a couple bits in there that are kind of stylistically yours, but...
Yeah. I don't want to talk about it like I'm trying to be super vague, but that's about all I can say right now.
Well, if you've heard Hirosaki-san mention his 3,000-word sex scene, that's the story that it was in.
Yep.
I'm just trying to fluster him while he has a mouthful of hot tea. But we should get to some letters here because we've been having guests on and all kinds of stuff like that, and we are still checking our inbox, honest. We've been neglecting our inbox.
It's collecting e-dust. And I mean that as in, like, electronic digital dust, not like you crumbled up a thing of ecstasy and turned it into dust.
Wow, that would be interesting.
I can read the first one. So we have, Dear Kyle Gold and Kame Hirosaki, I am mostly a poet, but on occasion I do like to write. It sounds like there's a joke in there waiting to be made. Like, I don't write, I'm just a poet. I know many people stress that you write all the time. If I've listened to some of the Unsheathed episodes and I'm still working on them, but from what I've heard so far, you would encourage newer authors to write more. I do not write very often. I only have a handful of stories, and currently, while I have worked on some things as of late, I have not put anything out in months. I have the time lying around, so that's not the issue. The issue is this. I like to write good stories, but there's a big difference between an okay story and a good one. I'm occasionally in the mood to write a good story, and when I am, I can actually write a good story. If I sort of want to write a story, you get an average one. Flat, normal, standard. I've written 2, maybe 3 good stories. Reversing the Roles, which I'm guessing is a story title of his, actually got attention from some of the bigger names in the fandom, even though, ironically, the other story that I had up at the same time was my first real erotic story, and it still managed to get more views on Yifstar. I think he means that the non-erotic story was getting more views on Yifstar? Or I'm
not quite sure what he means there, actually.
I like the feeling of knowing that I have a good, complete story with real words, real dialogue, and real passion. The problem is I can't do it on a dime, and sometimes it turns out badly if I try. I once scrapped an entire story because I knew it was worth so much more, and that I had screwed it up so terribly because I forced myself to write. But I suppose I should get to my actual question. Is it better to write okay stories that are not my best, or to sit on things and only write when you really feel the literary juices flowing? Sincerely, Zarin Isune.
Well, interestingly enough, just today, there was a post on an agent's blog that I follow about the secret of writing, or one of the secrets of writing, and he said, speaking of people who can't function without the phone in their paw, he said that the secret of writing is what one author calls BIC, but in chair. He says, people all talk about the inspiration hitting, and there's no novel has ever been written purely from bursts of inspiration. If authors waited for their bursts of inspiration, novels would take 100 years to write. You have to have discipline.
Yeah.
You have to sit down and get your butt in the chair and write.
Yeah.
And he said there's lots of variations on it. It's like, it's a nice day outside, but I have to write. There's a video game I want to play, but I have to write.
Yeah. Treat it like a job in a way. I think that in some sense he's sort of overthinking things here when he says, you can write a good story or you can write an okay one, and should you write when you're not going to be writing a good story? Don't think of it like that. I mean, when you're sitting down to write, you should always strive to do your best job that you can with it.
Well, but I know what he means, because, we've all had that flash of inspiration where we're like, this is a cool story, and we know how to write it, and you're driven to push all the way through it. And what he's saying is, sometimes if he's just got sort of part of an idea, or if it's not inspiring him and he writes it, it just comes out kind of flat. And what I would say is, you need to train yourself to go through an editing process to turn that flat story into a good story.
Yeah. Once you have something on paper, you can look at it and go, okay, why isn't this more interesting? How can I make it more interesting? And if you haven't gone through the step of at least getting something on paper, it's going to be almost impossible to refine something into an idea when it's just this nebulous thing that doesn't exist yet.
Right. And, this is something I say a lot to people, which is you make decisions about the priorities in your life. And a lot of people will come up and say, well, I really want to be a writer, but I just don't have the time to be a writer. And, you ask them what they do with their time, and we did a panel on this at FurCon. I said, make a list of all the stuff in your life that is preventing you from writing, that you feel, is taken away from your writing time. And that list is things that you are prioritizing over writing in your life. Well, I can't, I have to go hang out with my friends. Well, I have to go play video games. Well, I'm too tired. I can't spare the time. I can't get up early enough in the morning, and then I come home from work and I have to make dinner, and then I'm too tired to do it. Then, TV shows are on and whatnot. Everybody has a life. More or less. But, if getting the stories out is important to you, if that's something that you really want to do, you will make the time not only to write when you're inspired, but to write when you're not inspired. And you'll make the time to learn to make those stories better.
Yeah. And, caveat up front, some of what you write will suck.
Yes.
You have to accept that. It will happen. You'll write something and you could work on it for days, weeks, or longer, and then look at it and go, yeah, this was no good. And maybe you have to throw it out. But you know what? If you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be writing all the time and you're going to keep working on ideas, not all of it's going to suck.
And the more you practice, the better you get.
Yep.
It's just, it's much more apparent with stuff like physical activity, where, you practice shooting a basketball every day. Eventually you'll get pretty good at it. And you can kind of see the improvement. Like, you're like, okay, I made 12 baskets today and I made 14 tomorrow. But it's harder to see that improvement with writing. But it's there,
yeah,
honestly.
And with very rare exceptions, you don't just decide you want to be good at something and then suddenly you're good at it.
Right.
You have to work for it.
So
we can play you a montage with, you're the best.
So write stories and learn to make the flat ones good and learn to make good ones better. And which ties into our next email, actually. Greetings again. First of all, I can assure a previous listener that they are not the only non-writer in the audience. I have aspirations to write a short story sometime, but I can't get past the substantial obstacle. I just can't come up with a good idea for one. Basically, the only ideas I have interest me, but no one else would care to read them. This is a dumb question, but given my paralyzing lack of creativity, do you have any advice that could help a thoroughly uncreative person be creative? Perhaps there's a pill I can take for that or something. Otherwise, since I'll clearly never make a living as an author, do you have any advice for getting started in a career as a dead hooker? Many thanks, Dimitri, Minister of Blowjobs.
I really want to make a third Showgirls reference after that last question, but I can't justify it.
Oh, we'll just leave that one. I think Minister of Blowjobs is a pretty good side career if you're not going to be a writer, but...
Actually, yeah. Although, in speaking of things that give Kaz a run for his money, on Twitter, it was Marcus Noble was talking about how, every Friday I go and get my Slurpee. And I commented, I'm like, out of context, that sounds, really playfully naughty.
It does, actually. I kind of like that.
I thought you'd appreciate it.
Although it does make me wonder if, Minister of Blowjobs is just, a guy behind a desk, and, if there's a substandard blowjob, he has to write it up and report it to the authorities.
Have, a rubber stamp.
Exactly. Well, again, a couple things here. I mean, sit down and force yourself to write, and it's going to be bad. What's the comic guy's name? Barry Windsor Smith. There's a famous saying, everyone has 10,000 bad drawings in them. Well, everybody has a bunch of bad stories in them.
Some of mine are online.
Hirosaki-san and I have both written a bunch of stories that no one's ever going to see. So, sit down and write them out. Don't get obsessed with the fact that maybe no one else is going to be interested in your ideas. Like I said, when I said Vault Sofa Wolf, I was basically like, it's a romance with a gay fox, and there's explicit sex in it, and I kind of like it. What do you guys think? And they thought they could sell it, and
lo and behold,
we had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a few stories online, but we thought maybe 30, 40 people might like it. So.
Yeah, I mean, when you're saying nobody's gonna like this idea but me, well, how do you know that if you don't put it out there?
Oh, exactly. Especially in the furry fandom. I mean, if you're passionate about an idea, chances are there's someone else out there who's passionate about it too. I mean, there's what's the Notcast thing? Pedobestia necrophiles or something?
Oh, Pyropeta. Necrobestiality.
Yeah.
Wow. Why do I know that?
I don't know, but I knew you would. Thank you, the good folks at Notcast. We haven't given a shout out to them in a while.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, unless the story... Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I miss Saverin's voice reading my stories.
Oh, I bet you do. But no, getting back to this real quick, unless the story the idea that you have is really nothing more than gratuitous wish fulfillment, then, okay, write that story and then never show anyone. That one you can just get out of your system. And
well, that one you get out of your system and you post it to Yifstar. Or, I'm sorry, So Furry. But yeah, I mean, those stories, there's a place for just about everything you can write. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, when I meant gratuitous wish fulfillment, I meant, solely on the part of the author.
Right. Sort of author injection into the story.
Yeah, just look at how awesome I am, which, you're probably the only person who's going to appreciate that story. So, I mean...
yeah, and that's true. But I do think that, especially in fandom fiction, there's a place for just about everything. And you can write a little wish fulfillment story and just post it up there. And, if it's, fetish based, that's going to attract attention. I mean, look at some of the top stories on So Furry. It's all,
someone's into it.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I'll say.
Was it the second most popular story on there was cub incest or something?
I believe it was
non-consensual cub incest. I don't remember what other tags were on there.
It is outside my interest purview.
Yeah. I think it doesn't actually show up on my account anymore. But anyway, not to disparage it. I'm sure it's a fine story. It has a lot of popularity, so it's moved some people. But yeah, that's the big thing, is just don't worry about who's going to read it. Don't worry about who else is going to like it. If you're passionate about it, sit down and write it. The only other thing I was going to say is, you call yourself a very uncreative person, but if you have story ideas, you're not uncreative.
Yeah.
It's just maybe writing might not be the right way for you to express those ideas. You could do a comic script. You could do a, it's not easy to learn to draw by any means, but you could also draw characters. You could rap music. You could role play online.
Yeah.
I mean, that's creative. It's not something you can kind of take around and show people, but there are people that are
say we're furries. We just make stuff up all the time. That's what we do.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's our raison d'etre.
All right, why don't you go on? Because I think we're.
Hello, Cam and Kyle. I was so upset when I realized I had missed your first listener challenge on air. Hopefully, I'll be able to catch the next one. I had a question to you about dusty projects. I have a story idea that has followed me in one form or another since I started writing years and years ago. like the shark in Jaws 4. And I finally started to put it in a form that I thought I was happy with. It was a story that was mostly action-adventure with a subplot of romance. As I wrote, though, I realized more and more that I really cared much more about the romance, and the action-adventure plot had become dull and uninteresting to me. I am more than happy to scrap the part I don't like to make way for more romance, but in doing so I realized that my entire backstory for the main character would no longer work, and I'm struggling to make corrections that would allow me to keep the parts of the story I've written that I like, while weeding out the dull parts. And I'm getting tangled up in plot gaps and unanswered questions. I was wondering if you had any similar experience of scrapped then unscrapped projects, and if so, how did you dig yourself out? Hope to hear from you, loyal listener TJ Fulf.
Hi, TJ.
So, one of the things here is, so there's two things that stand out about this. Is that one, okay, you've written something and then you realize that something else about it interests you more, and you're like, okay, well, how do I get rid of this stuff? And he says, okay, like, if I don't have this, the backstory for the characters doesn't make sense. So, okay, I would say don't get rid of that part of the story, but de-emphasize it. You can, you don't need to write big, long, detailed scenes about what's going on. Still cover those bases, but just don't make that the focus of what the story's about.
And also, just kind of as a note, you should not be writing your entire backstory for the main characters into your story.
Yeah. But I mean, I think what he was saying, like, if I pull basically to change the plot.
I'm just saying that as a precautionary note.
When he's saying, okay, but when I pull this out, then the other stuff doesn't work, and I want to be able to keep those parts.
Right.
I'm not sure if he means that, I don't want to have to rewrite those parts at all. I mean, whenever you change something, you're going to have to go back, and even the stuff you're going to keep, you're going to have to tweak it and re-edit it and revise it, just in general. So, I mean, that's one of those suck it up and deal type things.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say finish up and then go back and edit. I mean,
yeah.
All of my books ended up being about different things than I thought they were when I started out. So I just had to finish the manuscript, and if you try going back and revising before you're done the manuscript, you're going to get stuck in an endless loop, because you're going to revise early on, and then you're going to get a little bit further and things are going to change again. You're going to have to go back and revise.
Yeah, your focus is going to keep changing. Your priorities are going to keep changing. Your narrative thrust is going to keep changing, and you're never going to be done.
Yeah, you have to keep your narrative thrust even and steady. Build up a nice narrative thrust rhythm.
I knew there was a reason I liked you as my co-host.
Not just because I look good with a microphone near my muzzle.
And your pretty sexy hat that we were talking about last week.
I know. I answered the question, why do I wear the hat?
Because it makes me look good.
Because it's awesome. I don't know if that qualifies as experience with scrapped and unscrapped projects, but yeah, anytime I write a long story, invariably it changes in between starting it and finishing it, and I have to go back and what happens is you go back and you start reading the early sections with a better understanding of what the whole story is about. And then you see the rough edges and you smooth them out.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you do it. That's how you, take something and, like I said, it's like, you're the one telling the story, but there are parts where you don't necessarily know the story you're telling until it's already over.
Right.
That's not the same thing as make it up as you go along.
Not quite. All right, last two I think are kind of quick, so I think we can, ironically, we can rush through them. Alrighty. Now you guys know me, and Kyle, you may especially be aware of my writing speed. It's my crutch. I suck at writing well quickly. As a matter of fact, I'm still surprised that I managed to turn out a half-decent story for the X anthology during the course of a month. So my question is, do you have any strategies for writing faster? That was from Pyro, and the side benefit of not answering questions promptly is that sometimes they answer themselves. So recently he wrote us again and said, "Dear writers of the Fox and Otter persuasion, I've had an epiphany of sorts. Earlier I sent you a question asking how one could write faster. Today, I found myself playing a game when my computer, perhaps fortuitously, decided that it was time to turn off, and did so. I've had that happen, and I hate it.
Yeah.
It was then that I realized the hour and change that I'd been playing the game could be spent doing other more productive things, namely, writing. And to think that I'm about done with a story for a contest that I probably wouldn't be happy with entering as it required 2,500 words within a 2-week time frame. I could have finished the story. So I decided to share this minor epiphany with you guys and your listeners, as they might not have realized this particular wrinkle yet. Also, don't think that I've forgotten about the second challenge you guys have thrown down to me. Think I can't do it? Well, ha! I took your androgynous robot fox and I made something that got Hirosaki-san to squirm in utter delight. That's not too hard.
Kyle does it all the time.
He's a very squirmy otter. Perhaps I might strike gold a second time, but in the meantime, I want you guys to keep tabs on me. I am officially calling myself out on your podcast, and if I don't finish the story within 3 weeks of this letter being read, or at least 2,000 words, then you guys, I don't know, think of something. Witty regards, Pyro. We like Pyro.
I was going to say, we'll revoke his androgynous robot fox privileges.
No, I don't know. We'll think about something. I'll force him to contribute to another anthology, maybe.
Oh. That would require you to edit another anthology.
Yeah, I know. That's the downside. Yeah, so again, that's basically just the same thing we were talking about, which is... I don't know if there's a trick to writing faster while you're actually writing, but, I mean, my trick is be thinking about the stories in odd moments when you're not at the computer, and then when you do get to sit down, it's much more in your head, as opposed to having to make it up while you're sitting at the computer.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise that blank screen is going to be super intimidating.
Right. But yeah, just, I mean, I play little card games. One of my tricks is to try to play... I need to play games as a break every now and then from writing, so I try to play games that have really short turns so that I can say, all right, I'm going to play one turn, 30 seconds, and then I'll go back to the writing.
As opposed to, like, Free Cell, where you can stare at it for minutes trying to find a move.
Oh, yeah, you have to have strategy and stuff with Free Cell.
Yeah.
But we'll look forward to your story, Pyro. We very much like the last one, so
yeah,
this one should be fun.
Made me squirm in utterly delight. I always like doing that.
Yes, you do. You do it on the podcast just about every time.
And then, we intend to close out. So, hello, writers of the furry kind. This is Running Cat, your Eastern Washington listener and ever-loving advice taker. I was one of the few who had heard of you guys at Rainforest 09. Yes, remember you being there?
Yep, thank you.
So anyway, I wanted to ask you a question and make a comment about the script challenge. First, the question with some background. I decided to take a second look at a story I began writing some years ago. I was still in college, and that was over 11 years ago now. I did all my writing in longhand on legal pad, as that was the easiest way for me to always have something to write on. Ooh, I admire your dedication and the state your wrist must be in. I wrote over 1,000 pages when the story began to get tiresome, so I put it aside for a while. Then I rediscovered it some years later and decided to copy it into my computer as I began to get worried of what might happen to the original manuscript. Around 580 pages, handwritten pages that is, having been typed, I once again got tired and began doing my Sarah and Dorothy cases. He mentions, Kyle, he gave a printed copy of him at Rainforest. Then about a week or so ago, I was cleaning my office and found the printed copy of the typed-up part of the story and began wondering how many words is in it so far. So to make a long story short, I know, too late, I found the file and what I had typed in is 112,706 words, and that is only half or so of the transcribed manuscript, which is only 3/4 written. So I'm wondering, could this story possibly be way too long? If it isn't sort of going on to a second draft, I would also like to finish the story someday, as I wrote the ending and just have to get the middle 3/4 done. And then he adds, as to the script writing, I have some software that's called Final Draft that makes writing scripts a whole lot easier. I had hoped to turn in one of my stories into a script and create a Radio Furry podcast show with them using the software. Any script writing has a whole lot of rules, and this software makes it easier to create any such projects. Anyway, I love the show. I'm learning a lot, and I hope to see you both again at Rainforest this year. I will even supply a bottle of wine if need be. Running Cat, whose bowler name is Zip Cat. So,
yeah, I was going to say, I wondered if he gave himself that name, because Biop told us in no uncertain terms that you can't give yourself a baller name.
No, that's a bowler name.
Oh, a bowler name.
Bowler name.
Gotcha.
Bowler name. You can give yourself your bowler name.
That's true. So I got out my calculator here because I'm trying to do some math and I couldn't do it in my head. So half of the manuscript that is only 3/4 written was 112,000 words. So 3/8 of his manuscript was 112,000 words. So, let me reverse my fractions here. 1, 1, 2.
I'm trying to do math in my head, and I know I can't do it.
Divided by 3. So it looks like he's about on track for, say, a 300,000 word novel.
That is long.
Yeah, and I'm kind of torn about how to answer this letter because, on the one hand, we've always said stories are however long they are.
Yeah.
On the other hand, that's too long.
Yeah, that's 2 books at least.
Yeah, and more likely 3.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, I'm going back to the previous one where we said don't put all your characters' backstory in the novel. If this is one of the first stories he's written, I'm going to guess that there's probably a lot of backstory in there of the characters that's not pertinent.
He says it was over a decade ago, too.
Yeah, I'm going to guess there's a lot of stuff in there that's not pertinent to the actual plot and character development, so...
yeah, go through that with a weed whacker or a garden weasel or something and just see what you can start tearing out and,
Not a journalist weasel.
I'm sure he'd be happy to, if you paid him by the hour.
Yes, actually that's true. But yeah, again, finish it first, but then go through and be prepared to really narrow it down. If it is possible that you have written an epic fantasy of the scope of George R. R. Martin's Ice Throne of Crow Sword Kings, but in that case, you should be able to partition it into a few books, and it's going to be several stories, and you should be able to split them up.
Do you know there's actually a George R. R. Martin Game of Thrones board game?
I'm not surprised.
I've played it. I didn't think it was very good. It was a bit laborious and tedious.
Is there a George R. R. Martin How to Get the Next Book Finished game?
I think they're still working on that one.
It would be funny if that game came out before the book. I'll get the Dresden Kodak guy on it. The George R. R. Martin publication game. We spend your time answering angry fans who demand to know why you don't have your book written. Explain to them that answering their demands as to why you don't have your book written delays writing the book.
It's the opposite of the Piers Anthony approach.
Which is let your fans write your books for you.
Yeah, and then basically just publish a thing and have, author's notes that are like dozens of pages long and just talk about how awesome you and everyone who helped you out is.
What's really funny is we're going to we're talking about Denise Crosby and Piers Anthony and George R. R. Martin on this podcast, and we're feeling fairly confident in the knowledge that maybe 100 people listen to this and those big names aren't among them, but this is going to be out on the internet forever, and someday Piers Anthony's going to be trolling the internet and be like, oh, Unsheathed, I wonder what this is about. Sounds bawdy.
One of our listeners I was talking to yesterday said that after listening to the WonderCon episode that they were disappointed that somebody didn't get Denise Crosby and bring her to our table.
Yeah, we tried, but we didn't give people enough warning. But what? All right, so I do have a couple WonderCon stories to share. I have mentioned Tim Powers as one of my influences as an author, especially with some of the occult stuff like Jacks to Open and the ongoing stories in the Furry Fiesta-Con book are all in that world, kind of inspired by him, which is sort of contemporary occult, supernatural-ish, but it's not paranormal. It's not like vampires and werewolves.
Yeah.
It's ghosts and magic and tarot cards and stuff. But it's really fabulous, and actually I got to meet him at WonderCon for the first time. I flash my writer props. I just sort of brought the book for him to sign and tried to talk writing with him, and I'm sure I tried. You would think that, having people come up to you and talk about your book all the time would make you more confident and facile when talking to one of your favorite authors, but it doesn't really happen. I think I was kind of like, I like how you do places in your books.
You book nice.
You word good. Right name in book. But the other thing was Peter S. Beagle was there, who is the author of The Last Unicorn, and who wrote the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings screenplay, which he told a very amusing story about, but it's his story, so I'm not going to tell it. You'll just have to go find him and ask. But it involves orcs.
Oh dear.
No, actually it involves the Riders of Rohan, but... So I'd gone over to his booth because it was really close to ours, and it was sort of Sunday afternoon, and I said, I should go over and get a picture or something. I hadn't actually brought any of his books, embarrassingly enough, but he was really engaging at the panel I went to see him at, so I went over there, and nobody's really waiting in line for him, and I said, do I have to buy something to get to talk to him? And they were like, no, just go. So I went up and started talking to him about the panel set up. I'd seen him on the panel, and we talked a little bit about the movie business, and we talked about foxes, and he has a story about a wild fox, which was an amazing story. And after like 10 or 15 minutes, there was a couple people behind me waiting for autographs. So I said, well, I'll let you go. And I turned around, and there was a young woman there who had been at our table, I think the day before. I think she'd actually come in on Saturday. And she recognized me, and she was like, oh, you're here. And then she turns to Peter S. Beagle, who in the WonderCon program book, it has been said, is mentioned as the greatest living American fantasy author, and said about me, he's got some great books. And I think I turned kind of red, and Kit said,
I'd like to read them. I don't think
I'll go get them right now. But yeah, my tail was kind of wagging when I came back to the booth. Kit said it wagged for quite a while afterwards, and we had a fun little discussion on Twitter about which of my books Peter S. Beagle would like best. I think Jacoby said, pick your most depressing book and give it to him. But I did grab a copy of the New Fables that has my story in it from So Full Press, and I gave it to Tim Powers. So,
oh, yeah. That's pretty cool.
He probably won't read it, but that's all right. One of these days, someone will be like, they'll have a copy of New Fables that I gave him, or a copy of one of my books or something, and they'll be stuck on an airplane, and they'll be like, I have nothing to read, and the bookstore's closed. Oh, let's pick up this book that this creepy guy gave me, and we'll see how terrible it is.
Then,
Then he'll send me an email saying, never talk to me again.
Oh, no. That's not how the story goes. You told a bad story, Kyle.
No, it probably goes, I'll read in the paper, like, author says eyes burned out, can never read again.
Oh, God.
Furry fandom ruined my creativity. Now all I picture is gay naked foxes.
That's not a fate worse than death.
Not for us.
Oh. On that mildly disturbing note, though.
Yeah, we should, well, we will tell y'all to write us at unsheathedpodcast@gmail.com. We do not have any appearances coming up, although I've been sort of kicking around the idea of maybe doing a live show sometime in the Bay Area, just, on our home turf, because I think there's enough people around here who've said they wouldn't mind sitting in on a podcast once in a while.
Yeah.
So
I'm interested to see how it goes.
Maybe we could find some venue that would allow us, or, just pack our secret mountain bunker with people. But we'll figure some stuff out about that. Unsheathed podcast gmail.com, Unsheathed on FA. I'm Kyle Gold on Twitter. I'm Kyle Gold on Laugh Journal. Kyle on FA.
Yep. Cam Hirosaki, likewise.
Sometimes with an underscore.
Yeah, but
people can figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Remember, butt in chair.
Yes, and tail over butt. I don't know what that was supposed to mean.
I think it means butt in, not like butt on wolf in chair.
I think I've seen a picture like that.
I think I've seen many. All right. Good night and happy writing. I promise to be more healthy and less sniffly next time we record.
All right. Cheers.